Writing a paper is daunting for many because there are so many parts to write. Today, I will share my entire workflow of how I write research papers from the blank screen to the final publication. I've refined this workflow many times and this is the fastest workflow for me, so I'll share it with you. First principle, commitment and planning. What is not scheduled does not get written. Start by blocking off 1 to 2 hours per day to write. Choose a time where you are the most productive. Now, the most important step is to know your writing blocks. For example, like a motivation, maybe you have inpatient service, certain hours of the day. Instead of waiting for things to happen, make sure you have a contingency plan for those days. So for example, when I'm on service, I have simpler writing tasks that do not require as much brain power, but still necessary to move paper forward. For example, formatting tables, scheduling meetings with my co-authors. Now, the actual writing. So when you first read a paper, it is laid out as abstract, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. But when you write a paper, you don't actually need to write it in that same sequence as how it is presented in a journal. It's just not efficient that way, and we don't think that way. Also, when you're writing a research paper, you're trying to build a new argument from your data. So let's begin from the ground up. So step 1, create tables and figures. When you do data analysis or if the biostatistician runs the analysis, they will give you multiple tables, multiple small tables. Start out by just combining the tables and make sure the tables are easy for yourself and the readers to understand. Then make figures. These do not have to be beautiful or perfect. Really, this is just to solidify your mind on how this data can be presented. Sometimes we are tempted to present our data in tables and tables just because it's easier. But for the readers, that is not as useful. So the question you should be asking yourself is, can I present this table as a figure? Another hack I use is to look at journals to see how the data are presented. If they typically use this type of tables, I will use a similar format, or if they use this sort of figures, I will also use that type of figures. You don't really need to reinvent the wheel. Once you're done, make sure you label them properly, like table 1, table 2, figure 1, figure 2. That will really help later when you start writing. Step 2, understand the results and create the central message. So one mistake with writing a research paper is not truly understand the results before writing the paper. And that's one of the main reasons people get writer's block. If you don't understand the results, if you don't really know your idea behind it, how are you going to write about it? So now you have tables and figures. Take a blank Word document and start listing down the notable findings. What are the positive findings? What are the negative findings? What's unanticipated findings? Any interesting trends? And now at this point, it's really important to pause. If there's any part of the data where you don't understand the interpretation of the results, make sure you speak to the statistician. Don't sweep it under the rug, because it's better to catch any mistakes before you start writing the whole paper and then you have to do a reframe. Now, once you're done, choose the most important finding. Craft your central message, central argument, or central statement. For those of you who do not know what a research argument means, let me give you a simple definition or formula. Argument means making a stand by providing evidence. In other words, argument equals claim plus evidence. What if you're writing a case report? You can do the same thing in terms of the results. What's the interesting presentation, what's the challenging diagnosis, and what's the challenging management. And once you're done with that, find the most important learning point, and that will be your central message or central argument. Step 3, get everyone on the same page. At this point, you may be tempted to write, but don't do this until all of the co-authors are on the same page. I've been burned multiple times, and these mistakes have cost me headaches and extra months and months of work. Let me save you some time. So there are 3 main things you want to agree upon. First, author sequence. Second, paper outline. And number 3, target journal. Author sequence. There are countless times how this can be a huge source of conflict. If you have not agreed upon this, make sure that there is a discussion of who becomes the first author, who becomes a senior, and who becomes a senior or the last author. Also, discuss the sequence of the middle authors. Because many papers show the first 3 names before they say et al., some co-authors may want to get the second or third position. Only when everyone is in agreement would I allow people to write. One more point before I move on. If you are the lead author, your position is not guaranteed. You still have to prove yourself. As the name implies, the lead author should be leading the way. You guide the meeting agenda, you drive the timeline, you make the tough decisions, you lead the whole team to the finish line. You want to be the undisputable lead author throughout the whole process. Next, paper outline. This is also another crucial step. There have been several times where I have written the whole paper, then realized that one of the co-authors disagree with my framing or discussion points, and then this paper becomes a huge editing nightmare. So at the end, I had to start from scratch and rewrite the whole thing. So make sure you create an outline that has the central argument, the key results, the result interpretation, the key discussion, the key findings you want to include in the discussion section, and what to include. Only when everybody is agreeable, then you can start delegating and dividing the work. The third thing to agree upon, the target journal. I personally like to choose the target journal now because I can cater the writing to the correct audience. This is really important, especially when your topic can go into different fields. One example, I had a paper on kidney transplant outcomes among patients with multiple myeloma. So this means this paper could go into a general medicine journal, a kidney journal, a kidney transplant journal, or a hematology journal. And depending on which one you choose, the framing will be different. Another benefit of choosing the journal now is that you know the word count and the formatting requirement ahead of time. If your co-authors are hesitant to choose one yet, at least shortlist the top 3. Now that everyone is on the same page, let's get on to the next step. Step 4, writing the different sections. So first thing is create all the headings and subheadings. The formatting is variable depending on your field, so make sure you follow the format that is typical in your field. In medicine and life sciences, it's usually the introduction, methods, results, and discussion, or IMRED. But when I write in this sequence: method, results, discussion, and introduction. So this is not conventional, but I've tried this quite a few times. I've tested this quite a few times, and this has been the fastest workflow for me. Take it as you will. And I'll explain why I go in this sequence. First, start with the methods. I like to do this first because it generates a quick win. If you have a research protocol, just copy the methods and paste it here, and then change it all to past tense. Next, the basic structure in life sciences: study design, the population, setting, definitions, outcomes, variables, measurements, statistical analysis, and then ethics components. Next, write the results section. This finding typically comes in 3 big categories. The first part, descriptive data. Second part, inferential data. And the third part, supportive data. Descriptive data is where you describe the sample population. Think about the mean, the median, the percentages. Next, inferential data. That's where you are making conclusion based on data. This is where the most important findings usually lie. So your positive finding, your negative finding, and then finally, the supporting data. Here, you are really presenting findings to show that your study findings and your study design is robust. And these are typically different validation methods to test statistical assumptions. Next, I would write the discussion section. And at this point, most people say, oh, you should write the introduction now. I personally write the introduction the last, and so let me explain why. It's because personally, I struggle with writing a compelling introduction at the start. I can write a so-so paragraph, but they're not that strong or not that persuasive. Only after I go deep into the discussion or writing the discussion, I get a lot more key insights and become sold about my research project and the message. The question is, why does that happen? Think about this. When you're writing the discussion, you're also reading other research papers to support your arguments. And when you start linking study findings with other research, then you will realize how your project can move the needle or how it can move science. And then now you truly believe in the implication and application of the research project. When you write the introduction, it is just so much easier to think about the gaps, and you can start writing the introduction a lot faster, and it becomes more compelling. All right, now let's talk about the discussion. This is the main structure of the discussion section. Paragraph 1, this is one paragraph that basically say what have you done and what are the key findings. Then you have a bunch of middle paragraphs. That's the meat of discussion. The final few paragraphs, application and implication. I like to have this extra paragraph to summarize how the study findings can be used in the real world. Or in other words, it's like the payoff paragraph. Then you have one paragraph on limitations and strengths, and finally the conclusion. Now, let me give you a simple formula when you start crafting a paragraph in the discussion. So TEEL, TEAL. T for topic sentence, E for explain, E for evidence, and then L for link. So topic sentence, this is a claim of your study interpretation. And then E for explain, here the next sentence you provide more details and context. And then E, evidence. Now here you start pulling other studies and talk about other studies that either support or contradict or contradicts your study finding. If the study finding is similar to yours, how does yours add more to the literature? If your study finding is different from others, how is it different? Why is it different? Finally, L, link. This is your final conclusion after linking findings from your study and other research studies. For example, your conclusion could be, oh, this research is leading towards one direction, or if it's conflicting finding, you may say something like, oh, more research is needed. All right, next, the introduction section. Remember, the introduction is not the background. You're trying to introduce the problem and why your research is here to answer or solve the problem. So these are the questions you should be thinking about. What is the current problem? What has been studied before? Why hasn't it been solved? What problem remains? Why is your research here to solve this specific problem? Finally, add a sentence about what is the potential application or implication of your study. Finally, the abstract. This consists of the four main things: introduction, methods, results, and conclusion. The abstract should be able to stand alone. That's because most people will read the title and abstract before they decide if they are going to read the rest of the paper. So you need to include all of the most important information seen in the main manuscript. Remember, your research manuscript is not a novel, so there must not be a big reveal or surprise that only shows up in the main manuscript that is not in the abstract. The introduction section of the abstract, usually 2 to 3 sentences. Why is this important? And why does this research need to be done? And what your study aims are. Methods include the key methods such as the study design, the outcomes, and key statistical methods. And the results will take up the bulk of your abstract, so include a little bit of descriptive data like the total sample size, brief demographic, and the important inferential data. And as for the conclusion, it's typically 1 sentence about the conclusion of your study findings. Sometimes you can add more and you can talk about application or implication. No discussion is needed here. Congratulations, you have created your first draft. Now, step 5, it is time for editing. At the early stage of the editing process, focus only on the content because you want to make sure that you have the important points. Don't focus on the grammar, don't focus on the sentence structure yet. This is what you call developmental editing. Ask these sort of questions as you go through your manuscript. Do I need more evidence here? Is the organization good? Only once you're done, then you can start working on line editing. And that means you fix the paragraphs and sentences to make sure they flow well and sound nice. Next level editing, proofreading. Here now you can check the tenses, the numbering, the legends. Then finally, check the referencing. Make sure you remove the duplicates and also check the formatting. I always recommend using referencing software because it just reduces mistakes. Now, how soon do you send it out for review? It really depends on the maturity of your writing and your supervisor and co-authors. Some supervisors want a very clean draft, and others, they prefer early drafts so that to make sure that the overall structure and the content are accurate before you start working on it. When you send for feedback, make sure you are specific on what you want. For example, you can ask questions like, oh, can you kindly review to give me feedback on the organization of the discussion section? Or you can ask things like, oh, have I given enough evidence on this discussion point? Don't just say, please review this paper. Or worse, what are your thoughts? If you're at a stage where you're still working on the content and the points and have not looked at the flow or grammar, make sure you let your supervisors know. If not, the first response is to fix the words and the sentence structure. Step 6, prepare for submission. Once you have a draft that is close to submission and you're waiting for co-authors to review, you start the new submission. You don't wait around, twiddle your thumbs. Start a new submission at the journal site. You will be surprised how long these can take. The first time, it can take the whole day. That's because you have so many things you need when you're submitting a paper. For example, cover letter, formatting, a bunch of formatting things, checklists, reporting guidelines, acknowledgements, conflict of interest, declaration of authorship. There's a lot of boxes for you to check. Then do one final check before you submit and make sure everyone is agreeable to the final version. Step 7, after submission. First thing you should do, celebrate. You have done an amazing job from research project and now all the way to submission. You have done so much work. So congratulations. Then keep a record of all of what you have submitted and send the latest version to all of your co-author for record keeping. Now, after submission, I usually watch for a few days for that journal to unsubmit the paper. This can happen if you do not follow their formatting guidelines or you have gone above the word count. Some journals are very strict, some do give some leeway. So the managing editor will go through your first round and make sure it looks good, make sure you meet their formatting guidelines before they allow it to go through. Step 8, understand journal decision. After a paper submission, then you wait for the journal's decision. It will come in 3 forms: desk rejection, review and reject, third one, revise and resubmit. Desk rejection means that the paper does not get to peer review and is rejected at the outset. Usually there are no comments for this, move on to the next journal. But if it was sent up for review and the paper still gets rejected, still go through all of the comments. Try your best to fix it as best as you can before you send it out. Getting peer reviewed is a major step in improving science. So I never waste an opportunity to fix my paper based on peer feedback. Then if you get a revise and resubmit, you are very much closer to submission. Some people get overwhelmed at this stage and want to give up because they see so many comments and they feel like, oh, what's the point? This person is tearing my thing apart. What's the point of submitting? The fact that they gave you comments, the fact that they did not reject it, means that there is still chance. It also means that the editors want to take your paper. The editors are still interested in your paper. Make sure you work on this as soon as possible. Oftentimes, the editor and reviewer comments come in big chunks of paragraphs. And sometimes the comments are merely a summary of certain section of your papers. Separate out commentary from actual requests that need to be addressed. Then meet with your co-authors to discuss what can be addressed and what you can't address. If you specifically want to figure out the shortest path to publishing your research papers, then I highly recommend checking out this free video training in the description. It even comes with an academic writing cheat sheet and free templates. So make sure you click on the link in the description below.